Do you remember Shonen Jump?
What dangers await Yugi? Can the Super Saiyans save the Earth from its deadliest foes? Find out in Shonen Jump.
If you lived in Canada, the UK, or the US during the 2000s, and were into anime and manga, you probably owned or saw one of these magazines whenever you'd walk past the magazine or book section at a store. They played a pivotal role in introducing many different manga series to new audiences, including myself. And in this video, I wanted to discuss the history, legacy, and what happened to Shonen Jump. Shonen Jump was a monthly manga magazine, published by Viz Media from November 2002 until April 2012. It ran for over 110 issues, as well as having a first preview issue, special releases, and hardcovers. To better understand the history of Shonen Jump and how it came to be, we can take a look back at an interview between Deb Aoki and Jason Thompson, a senior editor at Viz Media at the time of Shonen Jump's release. When asked about how he became the first editor for the English edition of Shonen Jump magazine, Thompson states, in early 2002, Viz was looking for their next big thing to do after the success of Pokemon. Pokemon made a lot of money for them, but they weren't able to generate any big follow-up to it. So one thing they wanted to do was launch a shonen manga magazine. I had always been a fan of Shonen Jump titles, so I had always regretted that Viz couldn't get these licenses because SHUEISHA, the Japanese publisher for Shonen Jump, wanted all their manga to be presented unflopped. Viz wasn't ready for that at the time, so the original plan was to do a manga magazine that would have Shonen Jump titles, but wouldn't be Shonen Jump. However, the Shueisha people were very hard negotiators, so they bought half of Viz in exchange for the privilege of publishing the Shonen Jump titles and the Shonen Jump name. This was a huge change for Viz, but in the end, it worked out very well for them. Shueisha's decision to keep their manga unflopped, basically reading it in its original right-to-left format, was actually a pretty substantial shift at the time. Around that time, many of their manga being released was in a flopped format, read from left to right. Tokyopop, another manga publishing company, was also known for having their manga unflopped as well. I'm sure we all remember seeing the "stop, you're reading the wrong way" warnings when we tried reading manga for the first time. With all of that being said, the release of Shonen Jump in English didn't come without its hurdles. For example, there were concerns raised by Hiroyuki Takei, the creator of Shaman King. His concerns were that his manga would be altered too much, as well as concerns by Ichiro Oda, the creator of One Piece, who was sensitive to how his manga would be translated, right down to the sound effects. Thompson took these concerns into consideration and told them that Viz would do their best to respect their works. Ultimately, it is up to the manga creator themselves to decide if they would like to see their manga get released in English. In order to ensure the success of Shonen Jump magazine, Viz Media partnered with companies like Cartoon Network, Suncoast, and Diamond Distributors, among many other retailers and businesses, to help them with their marketing and distribution of the magazine to get their product in front of as many eyeballs and potential customers as possible. They planned out a multi-million-dollar launch budget. In November 2002, Shonen Jump issue number 1 debuted with Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Sandland, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Yu Yu Hakusho being its debut titles, with Naruto debuting in the magazine's second issue at a cover price of $4.95 USD, with each issue of the magazine being over 250 pages long, containing 2 to 3 chapters worth of material for each series, as well as interviews with mangaka, industry news and announcements, fan art submissions, among many other quirks and features. Spread throughout the magazine, these magazines were packed full of content from cover to cover. The magazines would be a similar size to the Japanese release of Weekly Shonen Jump, making it so that the art wouldn't be shrunk down. With that being said, Viz Media did also release each series in single volume paperback editions as well, with some special releases like the Shonen Jump Power Pack box set, a box set that contained many of the early series featured in the English Shonen Jump magazine. Talk about a good way to market your new releases. I wish I could get my hands on one of these. Viz Media set out with a pretty lofty goal of having Shonen Jump reach a circulation of over 1 million copies after 3 years of its debut, with a sales goal of 100,000 to 200,000 copies just for the first issue alone. A sales goal they smashed, with the first issue selling out over 250,000 copies before it officially released, with the first edition being a huge hit, eventually having over 300,000 copies in circulation, needing to be reprinted multiple times. The magazine would eventually hover around a couple 100,000 copies in circulation per issue, with some issues performing exceptionally well, due to the inclusion of bonus items. By all accounts, the magazine was a huge hit. Not only did it sell well for Viz Media, but the stories and experiences that came along with reading it every month were what will always remain in our memories. When I was a kid, I remember whenever I'd go to the grocery store with my mom, I'd get bored just walking around with her. So I'd head over to the video games or toys area. But on the way over there, these magazines would always catch my eye. In Canada, there was a late night TV block on a channel called YTV, called Bionics, where they'd show a lot of anime like Naruto, Bleach, and Zatch Bell, similarly to Toonami in the States. Like many people, I got into manga through the Shonen Jump magazine, because I'd see them and recognize the characters on the covers like Naruto, or Ichigo and think, oh cool, there's a book version of the show I like, before I actually knew that the manga was the source material. Then I realized, instead of having to wait every week for a new episode, I could read the books to find out what happens next, causing the birth of just read the manga bro. While some of these manga had been coming out for years or even decades in Japan, back then, a lot of this stuff was brand new to the Western audience, including for myself at the time. So this amount of content was amazing to get your hands on and experience for the first time. This sentiment was shared by the co-founder of Viz Media, Seiji Horibuchi, who shared his thoughts on why he thought Shonen Jump would be successful. In an interview with ICV2, many American children do not even know that a comic exists for Dragon Ball. There are 3 or 4 million children that watch Dragon Ball. More than half of the children do not even know that there is a comic, or that everything originated from Shonen Jump in Japan. They don't know. So I think it's a perfect timing to let them know. The market supports it, and there's enough interest in the industry. Horibuchi was right on the money, since many of the manga series that had seen huge success on cable television received the anime boost. Basically, whenever a manga gets a successful anime adaptation, that acts as promotion for the source material. So after the anime ends, people want to find out what happens next, or just see what the series is originally like. So they check out the manga to find out. We can see a recent example of this with a series like Dandadan. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I'd see that you'd have to read the books from right to left, so that took some getting used to. But nowadays, I'd probably find reading English comics more unnatural than manga. Maybe that's a sign that I might be too deep into the trenches of weebdom. Nah, that can't be it. Another funny memory that I have about the magazine is how people would always unwrap them and steal the promo Yu-Gi-Oh card out of them. That sucks for anyone that actually wanted to buy them and get the card, but it did let me read them without feeling guilty about opening up the packaging. For anyone watching, if you actually held on to the cards from back then, you might be sitting on a small gold mine. Man, I really regret selling my childhood Yu-Gi-Oh card collection. While we can keep reminiscing about the good times we had with Shonen Jump, at some point, the good times do have to come to an end.
I wish there was a way to know you're in the good old days before you've actually left them.
During a panel at New York Comic Con in 2011, Brian Pietsch, the vice president of digital publishing at Viz Media at the time, announced that the April 2012 issue of Shonen Jump would be the magazine's last physical issue, with the cover of the last physical issue of Shonen Jump magazine featuring the text, "See you online, sjalpha.com." At the same panel, Pietsch and Viz Media announced that they would be shifting towards a digital version of the magazine called Shonen Jump Alpha. Shonen Jump Alpha started releasing weekly on January 30th, 2012. The magazine would release 48 issues throughout the year, the same amount as the original Japanese weekly Shonen Jump, with its debut titles being One Piece, Naruto, Bleach, Bakuman, Toriko, and Nura Rise of the Yokai Clan. The magazine would have a yearly subscription fee of $25.99 USD, which was the same as the print version at the time. However, they'd also offer a trial version, where users could rent an issue for 99 cents over a 4-week period of time. When asked about what Viz Media planned to do for customers who already had a subscription to the print version of Shonen Jump, Alvin Liu, the senior vice president and general manager of Viz Media, stated, "We will give them up to a year's subscription to Shonen Jump Alpha if they're a current subscriber. Unfortunately, we cannot continue the print version, but we're not forcing them to switch over. They can opt out." At the time of its release, Shonen Jump Alpha would also only be available in Canada and the US. Shonen Jump Alpha would release chapters for these series 2 weeks after they released in Japan. When asked about why they didn't release the chapters simultaneously with Japan, Alvin Liu stated, "If Viz can get this right, then the company can begin to close the time gap to making it completely simultaneous, and then also look into expanding the magazine into other countries. Viz Media would eventually accomplish a simultaneous release, with the launch of the Shonen Jump app in 2018, which I'll speak more in depth on shortly." In the same panel, Pietsch also addressed the issue of what happens to the chapters, in between where the physical Shonen Jump magazine is at, and where the near simultaneous release of Shonen Jump Alpha would be, as many of the series being released in the physical Shonen Jump magazine magazine were very far behind where the Japanese release was at. He stated that Viz Manga will do what they call a warp, a digital speed up of those manga chapters, where they will release digitally all the chapters in between, so that fans would be able to catch up to their favorite series faster, before the launch of Shonen Jump Alpha in January. At the time, while it was unclear exactly why Viz Media chose to move forward with a completely digital model for Shonen Jump, as fans, we can speculate on a few reasons for why they chose to shift towards this model. Firstly, at the time of this announcement, scanlation websites and apps were becoming and already were very prevalent in the manga community. So from a business perspective, this was most likely affecting Viz Media's bottom line, so they needed to find a way to compete with these alternative options that were already readily available to readers, aka their potential customers. At this time, manga sales in general were also at record lows during 2012, the year in which Viz canceled the physical release of Shonen Jump. The decline in sales for manga was most likely largely affected by the recession that had just occurred a few years beforehand, which had caused many people to not have as much discretionary income to spend on things like manga, as well as the fact that retailers like Borders had shut down, which was a huge sales driver for Viz Media and many other manga publishing companies at the time, who were also struggling or sadly shutting down shop in America. Lastly, by switching from a physical to a digital model, Viz Media also avoided many of the fixed costs that are associated with releasing a manga physically in English, with some of these costs being printing, shipping, distribution, warehousing, and marketing of the final product to retailers, although they would still have to pay for costs such as licensing, translating, and localizing the manga for a foreign audience. Due to the compounding effect of these factors, Viz Media realized that times were changing, and they decided to shift their business strategy, which in hindsight seems to have worked out incredibly well for them. As I mentioned earlier in this video, with the launch of the Shonen Jump app in December 2018, Viz Media was eventually able to achieve a simultaneous release schedule with Japan for multiple manga series from the magazine's weekly Shonen Jump, Jump Plus, Weekly Young Jump, among a few other magazines published by SHUEISHA. This app would run on a subscription-based model, priced at $1.99 USD a month at launch. Prices vary depending on the region you're in, based on the currency conversion from USD. The app also offers the first 3 and latest 3 chapters of most of their manga series for free, so you don't need to pay for a service if you're already caught up with the manga and just want to keep up with the newest chapter from that series, as well as offering the Shonen Jump Digital Vault, a catalog of tens of thousands of chapters from many of the manga released in Shonen Jump and the other magazines I mentioned earlier. With these moves made by Viz Media, it helped propel them to a great amount of success, as manga sales reached record highs during the pandemic. While they haven't peaked as high as they did back then, they're still going very strong. And with the help of viewers like you, it doesn't look like they'll be slowing down anytime soon. While Shonen Jump may not be the same as it was in its current form, I wanted to make this video to show my appreciation for the magazine. I'm grateful for the stories that the magazine contained, and the hours of entertainment that it provided, as well as the life lessons that were taught in the manga. They taught us about self-improvement through discipline, having confidence during pivotal moments, and showing loyalty and kindness to your loved ones throughout your life, among many other life lessons. Thank you, Shonen Jump.